So tell me, Sam, where were you born?
I was born in Webster, South Dakota.
Where's that?
Webster, South Dakota is by Groton, South Dakota.
Where's Groton for all of the 20,000 listeners that listen to this?
Yeah. So I was born in Webster. I grew up in Groton, and I grew up in the country right in between the middle of the two towns, two very, very small towns in northern South Dakota. Mostly I usually ask people if they know where Aberdeen is, and that gets them pretty close, and I usually don't ask them to try and figure out past there. So northern South Dakota, in a little town called Groton.
Gotcha. Yeah, being not from South Dakota, I know, like right when I moved in, I knew very little towns, but once you live here for a while.
There's really only three that I think you need to know if you live in South Dakota, because you're either from the Sioux Falls area or the northern Aberdeen area or West River, so Rapid City. Mm-hmm, so if you know where Rapid City, Aberdeen, and Sioux Falls are, you pretty much got it covered.
Which, when I came to school, I knew Sioux Falls, I knew Rapid City. I had no idea where Aberdeen was, but obviously you learn.
Go north. Yep.
You got any siblings?
I do. I'm the oldest of four, so I have an immediate younger brother who is a third grade teacher in Pierre right now. It's his first year doing that. And then I have a younger sister who is going to Mankato, University of Minnesota, Mankato.
My neck of the woods?
Yep, in Minnesota. And then I have my youngest brother, and he's a senior in high school this year at Groton.
Cool. So obviously this is a Sports Luke podcast, and we like to talk about sports.
Makes sense.
You like sports, right?
I do like sports. I like sports a lot. Yep.
What got you into liking sports when you were younger?
Oh, my dad. My dad got me into liking sports when I was younger because we weren't much of a hunting family. It seems like in the Midwest you're either hunting or you're sometimes hunting in sports or something. We weren't much into hunting, but we were into sports. My dad played sports growing up. He played football, baseball. He wrestled in high school, and he played football in college. And my mom was a cheerleader, so definitely sports were around the family when we were really young. And my dad was actually, and still is, the coach for the Groton football team. And my dad coached track and he coached wrestling. The small town, you do just about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up, hanging around football practices. After school, I'd walk over to the football field, and then my dad would take me home from there. So definitely sports were just a big part of my life growing up because my dad was, coaching, and, he played amateur baseball. So, he'd set me down in the dugout and while he was at bat or while he was, playing the outfield and stuff.
That's cool.
So, yeah, so that's probably where my love of sports came from.
Who are your favorite players or favorite teams growing up and also now?
Yeah. So, I'm a Minnesota fan. You know that. So Minnesota Vikings. We actually had season tickets to the Minnesota Vikings while they were in the Metrodome. And that's from actually my mom's side. My mom's originally from Minnesota, Sleepy Eye, Minnesota.
Yep.
If you know where that's at. Yeah. So my mom's originally from Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, and they had season tickets to the Metrodome. And then when we came along, my brother and I, we got to rotate with my dad, so we always got to go to a Vikings game, one or two Vikings games throughout the season. So that's, there's something to be said for going to pro games. So we always got excited to go to those games. And one of the best parts was we actually knew through a family friend of ours was a lady who ran the Jumbotron at the Metrodome.
Oh, yeah?
So every game we got to be on the Metrodome. And so for a split second.
It's so cool. I think so far I've only made it on there once, and that was, I didn't even remember. Yeah. I can't remember it, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So we got on every game because we knew the lady who was running the camera
that's
for
funny.
the Jumbotron.
That's funny. That is hilarious.
So, yeah. Oh, but then you asked about my favorite players.
Yes.
So I'm a big defensive football player. So Brian Urlacher from the Bears was my oh man, he was so cool. And I knew he was a wrestler in high school, and I was a wrestler, so I was like, Brian Urlacher, you're doing things right, obviously.
So obviously, you said you play sports in high school. Which sports did you play in high school?
So like I said, small town Groton. Groton was a population of 1,100. I think it's at 1,300 now. So how that relates to sports is, there's no specializing in sports. It's, you go from one sport to the other, to the other, to the other. So I started. So in the summer it was baseball, and then once the baseball season went over, it went straight into football. And then once football was over, it went straight into wrestling. And then as soon as wrestling was over, it went into track. And then track took you through the end of the school year, and then it was summer baseball again. So baseball, track, football, and wrestling. That's what I didn't do basketball. I did wrestling.
Can you give me a memory from each?
Absolutely.
Each sport, like might not be the best, but one that just sticks out.
Yeah, sure.
Or that would make for a good answer.
Good answer.
Good content.
Yeah. Okay. So baseball, I love baseball and summertime go together for me. Absolutely. So for me, my favorite memory of like playing baseball. And another interesting thing is South Dakota really doesn't have high school baseball. Mm-hmm. So it's all Legion. Legion baseball is big in South Dakota, so not high school or anything like that. So when I think of summertime, I think of like the ball diamond, and playing baseball. And so my favorite thing to do was we would go on weekend tournaments. And we'd go to like North Dakota, sometimes Minnesota. But those weekend tournaments were always a freaking blast. Holy cow. And it was just as fun staying in the hotels like after the games and stuff, because we would have mean hacky sack tournaments going on.
Not what I expected.
But as far as like baseball goes, those weekend tournaments and everyone would just be having fun, and and then that was the life, wasn't it? Not working, and so your weekends were just play baseball, get some food afterwards.
Play some sack.
Yeah, play some sack. Afterwards, that was just the life.
That's
that was
awesome.
So much fun. And then football, man, there's a million things I could say about football, but my favorite two things were playing in the state championship game my sophomore and junior year. That was memorable. And then wrestling. Wrestling was tough. Wrestling's a tough sport. It's hard to enjoy it, but when you do win, the thing I'll say is, it's all on you. You get all the victory. You get all the credit, which is kind of nice. But my favorite memory is probably I beat a state champ one time. I wasn't a stud in wrestling by any means or anything like that, but I beat a kid who ended up winning state that year, which was pretty cool. And then track and field, I was a discus thrower, so I loved throwing disc. And my favorite memory, probably my greatest accomplishment in throwing discus, was I placed third in state that year. It was my junior year, and I threw 170 feet, 2 feet away from the school record. Wow. But the coolest thing about that, though, is in South Dakota, I don't know if they do this in other states, but they have gold medals. And so that is all 3 different classes of South Dakota track, so B, A, and AA. Say if you're running the 100-meter dash and you're a B school, but if you have the fastest 100-meter dash out of all divisions, you get the gold medal.
Oh, that's cool.
So, and even though I didn't win discus or anything that year, but our group got the top 3 in all divisions. So none of the other divisions even came close to what we were throwing. So that was probably my favorite memory in track. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. So recently you told me about that it just came out. They did a news article about you and your brothers. Can you tell me about what that was about?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, I'm the oldest of 4. I have 2 other younger brothers besides me, and we all played football. I went on to go play college football. My brother went on to go play college football. My youngest brother just finished his senior year, his senior season, football season. And what was pretty cool was my youngest brother, the one playing in high school this year, was named to the 11B All-State team as a defensive tackle. And he is the third one of us to get All-State honors. So I was
third
Thorson to be named to the All-State team. So I was an All-State. I'll clarify this later, but just for the sake of this, I was All-State a linebacker. My first younger brother, was an All-State defensive back. He was an All-State safety. And then my youngest brother was an All-State defensive tackle. So they did a story on us because we were all 3 brothers and we were all 3 All-State. So Yeah, so that was pretty cool, and I was pretty excited for my younger brothers just to be able to experience that and to be able to say that we were all state. And another level of it was I thought it was pretty cool that from defensive line to the secondary we had all state in all different levels. So I like to think that we had the defense on lockdown.
That's cool. So I need an unbiased opinion. Who was the better Thorson brother?
Yeah, so unbiased. The first question, when they did the interview, the first question the guy asked was who's the best one, and I thought that was a pretty ridiculous question because the point that they failed to mention in the story is that I was 2-time All-State. And in South Dakota, they have this thing called Elite 45, which is the best 45 athletes in the state. I was 2-time Elite 45, and my other brothers didn't even have any of that. So I think it's a little ridiculous to even ask me who was better because I was the best. I mean, I don't even have to be. I shouldn't even have to argue it. Just look at the numbers.
So then, obviously, you had a lot of success in your high school years. Did you get any offers to play any other sports in the collegiate level?
Mm-hmm. So I did go on to play college football at Augustana, and I did receive offers. So I received a lot of offers when I was getting recruited to go to different schools to play football. I also did receive offers to throw in track because I was pretty good in discus. So I did get offers to go throw track. As far as baseball, see, that's the other thing about South Dakota is baseball. Nobody really gets offers to go play baseball in college. And I can only speak from, maybe in Sioux Falls, people are getting scouted and stuff like that, but there's no, in small town Groton, there was no such thing as people, scouts coming to baseball games, and I mean, our team, Groton, is known for its baseball, not football, baseball. Groton is continuously the best baseball team in the state. And we barely had I don't ever remember kids getting looked at to go play college baseball. So as far as me getting offers, it was mainly track and football.
Where were other offers coming from?
So I accepted the offer to Augustana. I also had offers to the University of Sioux Falls, USF, Northern State University, which is a school in Aberdeen, which is right by where I live, University of North Dakota, UND, not NDSU. I got walk-on offers to go play at SDSU. I think that was the only walk-on offer. Oh, and then Southwest Minnesota State in Marshall. So I got an offer to go play there as well in football. In track, I got offered to throw at Northern and Augustana.
How did your experience in college football, how was that similar? How was it different than high school?
There's a lot of differences. The first is that the game is faster. Everybody is faster. You have to understand things faster. You have to read things faster. And I was a defensive guy, so my mind doesn't really work in an offensive scheme type of way. But everything is, you have to react to things so much faster. Another difference is just the level of competition. I mean, what everyone said is coming out of high school is that in high school you were the star. You were the star and, you got all the publicity and stuff like that. Well, you go to college and you're surrounded by all the other stars that were the high school heroes in their hometown.
Made the game-winning catch.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're playing with all those other guys. So to think that you're going to be the standout is ridiculous, especially when you're young. Another difference is experiencing what redshirting means for the first time. That was tough. So in college football, it's not uncommon for people to redshirt their first year. And all that means is, you cannot play in a football game. And it's a way for people to, get their younger kids acclimated to playing in a college level. So a lot of kids come in from high school and they're, tiny. They're not strong enough. They're not fast enough. They don't understand the game. So they redshirt them a year so that next year they'll be able to compete. And so that's what I did too. I redshirt. And that's tough because you have to go through all the workouts. You have to go through all the practices, all the stuff that quite honestly sucks. And then you get to stand on the sidelines and watch your team play, and there's no chance of you getting in. whatsoever.
Mhm.
So that's something that was hard to get used to. Ways that it's similar. I mean, it's similar because it's the game. It's football, and getting out and getting dressed and tackling and all that stuff. I mean, that's the same. It's the same game from when you're young until if you go to play in the NFL. That's all it is. There's a business aspect of it too that's kind of annoying, but it all ultimately boils down to it's football. Just going out and playing football.
So what all positions did you play?
In high school or in
Let's do college.
college? So college, I was a linebacker, and as far as
Which one?
to be more specific, I played every linebacker position. So
What was your favorite?
middle linebacker was my absolute favorite. So we ran a 4-3. So there's 3 linebackers, 2 outside, 1 middle. Will, Sam, and Mike. And so for a while, my name was Sam, and I was playing the Sam linebacker, and I heard just about every joke you can imagine for that. So
Couldn't imagine that.
yeah, so Sam and Mike were both really fun to play. The Will linebacker is traditionally more of like a linebacker safety hybrid. So if you imagine like a big, strong safety, that's pretty much what a Will linebacker is. The weak side, they do a lot of covering. And strong side is more of, hard nose, get in there, stuff the run. And middle is, you get a headache after each game. So that's the best way I can explain. And then I was also long snapper. I was a 4-year starter. I tell people I was a 4-year starter in college because I was a long snapper every year.
Because when did you actually start seeing the field when you were a linebacker?
Linebacker, I was the starting linebacker my sophomore year. So technically my 3rd year.
Yeah.
So my redshirt sophomore year, I was the starting linebacker. And then my junior year, I split reps because I was playing all these different positions with another kid. And then my senior year, I actually didn't play because I got hurt. So I was long snapper and linebacker.
Tell me about how you got hurt.
So I got hurt going into my senior year.
Which I'm sure that was tough because that was the year like, oh, this is my senior year.
Yep.
This is my best I am.
Yep. So it was kind of one of those things where they make movies off of. Obviously when they make the movie out of my life, this is going to be a really dramatic part. No, it wasn't that dramatic. What happened was it was in fall camp, and for people who don't understand the really sucky parts about football, fall camp is right up there. Fall camp is tough. It's when you hear 2-a-days, which actually they don't have anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's, when people hear about, it's 110 degrees out, and we're pads up, and, people are passing out and stuff like that. That's during fall camp. And fall camp sucks. It's tough. And so it was my senior year going into fall camp, and I just remember being so excited that this was my last fall camp. This is the last one I had to deal with. And so I was just pumped that I, getting this out of the way. And it was our first 2-a-day, so it was right in the middle of fall camp, and it was the morning practice of our first 2-a-day, and it was towards the end of practice, and we just had it wasn't a live go, but we were all pads, full pads, and I went to go tackle C.J. Ham, who is actually the fullback for the Minnesota Vikings.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and went to go tackle him. And it was a gang tackle, so there was a bunch of us there. And what happened was my ankle got rolled up on, and between my ankle and my knee basically bent in half. So I like to tell people my ankle bent up and touched my knee. It was pretty nasty. It was pretty gross. There was a huge snap. Before I knew it, I was on the ground just screaming. I had one of my linebackers was sitting on my chest holding my head down because all he was saying was, don't look at it, just don't look at it. It was my ankle was, but so I obviously looked at it.
Yeah, of course.
You got to. And so my foot was laying on the ground, just completely flopped. Couldn't move it at all, couldn't wiggle my toes or anything like that. It was completely gone. Every ligament in my ankle was completely torn. My foot was actually black because of all the blood that had gone. I ended up breaking my tibia. So went in to the trainer, and they thought I had like a really bad sprain. And so I went into the head trainer. And the funny thing about that day too is I was the second oldest person on the team. The only person older than me came back that year after taking a medical red shirt. He went out with a career-ending knee injury 20 minutes before I went down that same practice. Wow. Yeah, so our head trainer was on his way to the hospital with him.
With him?
And so they got me back to the training room, and they said, all right, wait here. We'll put some ice on it. When BG gets back, we'll have him take a look at it. We'll see, we'll see what he has to say. He walked into the room, and they had the tape pulled up because they wanted to see like how I twisted it or something like that. And they said it was so gruesome that he didn't even check me out or anything like that. He saw the tape and he said, "All right, we're going to the emergency room."
Yeah,
because he knew something was broken in there. So that ended up in a couple of surgeries, and so I was out. So I didn't play a single game my senior year. Stood on the sidelines and ended up winning a leadership award, which I brag about because I won one award in my college career, and it was because I didn't play a single down. So, so I think I was better on the sidelines than I was on the field.
What year, as for Augie football, was their best out of the years that you were there?
Absolutely. That's an easy answer. So the best year I was there was actually my redshirt year, which would be the 2010 season. We made it to the semifinal round. Oh, God, I think it was, the semifinal round in the Division II playoffs. We had an 10-1 regular season, best record the school had ever seen, rated in the top 3 or 4 in the nation. We were tough. We were real tough that year. And the reason that I take credit, we ended up winning the conference that year. We tied. We won the conference. The NSIC that year. So I have a ring. So I have a conference championship ring. And I brag about it all the time. And when people ask me that was my redshirt year, and they're like, well, you didn't even play a game. I will fight people about this because I was on scout team. Because if you're a redshirt, you're on scout team. And that's the only thing you could do. So we were going up against one of the best offenses in the entire nation. And it was our job to show up, and to give them a look every single day. So we got our asses kicked every single day.
So you earned that fair and square.
Yeah, and so I like to say that we were as much a part of the offensive success as anybody else. So that was the best year that they had by far.
So you mentioned that you played with CJ Ham. Can you talk about how it was being his teammate, and then how you feel now seeing him actually do something in the pros?
Yeah, it's really really cool to be able to see that. And there had been other people that had gone to play in the NFL that like Thielen, like Adam Thielen. I played against him while he was at Mankato. But it's another thing when you're in the locker room with a guy, and so he was actually a year younger than me. So he came in, and we knew he was going to be something special when he walked into the locker room, and he was built like bigger than most of the linebackers we had. And just to put this into perspective, so CJ is a phenomenal fullback for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a phenomenal running back for the Augustana Vikings. But what people don't talk about enough is this guy. He was a running back. He was one of the nation's best throwers in college.
Oh, yeah?
The hammer throw. Look it up. That's the one where they spin around like crazy and they throw that big ball at the end of a chain. Yeah. He was one of the nation's best hammer throwers. Wow. And he set the school record in hammer throw and shot put.
Wow.
And here he is, a running back.
Right.
So look that up. That's a really cool story how good he was at that too. So he was actually a 2-sport athlete in college. But he's a great guy. Just a great guy. He was always fun to be around. And he hit harder than you can imagine.
And I'm sure you've been on the receiving end.
Yeah, and so we were on the receiving end a few times. I remember my junior year spring game. So every college has a spring game at the end of So this would have been my last spring game I would have played in, and it was full go. Not a lot of spring games now are full contact, but we did back then. And I was middle linebacker at the time, and CJ was the starting running back. And this is how we started off. So spring games are usually in the morning. I think ours started at like maybe 9 in the morning or something like that. And they do different situations. So this particular situation was coming out. So offense was backed up to like their 15, 10-yard line, and you had to play the situation from there. And so first play, they give it to CJ, A-gap. Like, A-gap. Here we go. Good morning. everyone
Wake up.
wake up. And so I'm middle linebacker, so I go in and meet him, and we just connect. Boom! And I had a headache the rest of the day, for sure. I don't think he gained too many yards off that. I'd like to think I held him to 1 or 2, but he definitely gave me a headache that lingered for a little while. But he was a blast to play with. Now watching him play for Minnesota, I know I look for number 30 every time I see him on the field, and I make sure I tell people at least 3 or 4 times that I played with him. So
yeah, because whenever I see him, especially when he scores a touchdown, I always try to send you a snap or something like CJ.
Oh, I freak out. Like I know how many times he carried the ball. I know how many times.
That's funny. That's awesome. Yeah, so that's really cool.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, you are married. How long have you been married for?
I've been married for just about a year and a half. Yeah, just about a year and a half now. We were married in July. So, I suppose it would be pretty close to a year and a half.
How long did you know Sara before you started dating? And then how long from dating to engaged to married?
Sure. Yeah. So Sara and I knew each other in high school. She actually went to, so I like to say I went to a small school, but she went to an even smaller school called Condé, South Dakota, which for a while was the smallest high school in the nation.
Wow.
So she had a pretty decent sized class, pretty big class. She had 6 people in her class. Yeah. So yeah.
For perspective, I had 365.
Yeah, I can't even. I had 40. I graduated with 40 kids, and I never once, because we were surrounded by all these little tiny schools. So I thought 40 people was pretty decent size. I was like, 40 people, that's
a few football teams.
Yeah, we have a pretty decent sized football team. We could put 11 people on the field. So she actually went to Condé until her sophomore or junior year. I think it was her sophomore year. She came to Groton. And then we started, so we knew of each other. We didn't really hang out. We weren't really, of the 40 of us, there was like 2 different crowds, and we were not in the same crowd. So we didn't hang out with each other a lot until our senior year. And then that's when I actually sat behind her in a math class. That's the only reason we started talking. No, it wasn't actually, because I ended up showing up late to this math class, and the class was full, which never happens, ever. And I was late to class. I don't know why, but there was one seat open, and so I had to take that seat, and it just happened to be right behind her. And we'd always share food in class, and that's literally the only reason we ever started talking. Yeah, and then, so that was my senior year, and so we actually dated for, I think it was 6 years, and then we got married. So we dated for a long time, all through college. And then we got married as soon as I was done with college and got a job. That was the whole thing. Get a job before you get married, because we didn't want to commit to too much before we were financially set off. So.
And so for those that don't know, you guys are pregnant, and you are due pretty soon, aren't you?
Yep. We got pregnant, and we're due in a few months in March, and that'll be our first baby. We found out it's going to be a little baby boy, so we're very excited about that.
So how are you feeling, Dad?
I'm freaking out in a good way, not in a scared way. I'm sure that part will come, but I'm so incredibly excited. I can't wait to be a dad. Before Sara and I got married, we had a discussion that we wanted to be parents, right away, and so that's what we set out to do, and that's what we're doing. So I'm so incredibly excited. I can't wait, and Christmas has been fun because I've been buying baby presents for a baby who's not even here yet, but it's fun.
So then let's get into after college. So what did you do for a job? What did you graduate college with?
I graduated college with 2 degrees, one in English literature, so writing, and then another in government and international affairs.
What did you want to do with that? Did you have any?
Yeah, I wanted to be a news producer, and that's actually the job that I eventually got coming out of college. But my whole thing was, so my dad, besides being a high school teacher, actually took 5 years and was a news reporter for 5 years, and so I got to follow him around when I was younger, and so I not only followed him around, but kind of thought he had the coolest job in the world, getting to do all these And he's got crazy stories about being a news. He got interview with Tyson, the head coach of Minnesota Vikings for a little while.
Mike Tice?
Tice, not Tyson. Yeah, Mike Tice. And it was just because he showed up to one of their practices in Mankato with a camera. And so he did all these crazy things, and he's like, "Yeah, you got a camera, you can get away with anything,
That's funny.
And so I fell in love with that, and I was like, I don't know if I want to be a reporter because they didn't get paid enough. That's why. But I was like, I'll be a news producer, and so that's why I went into writing, make sure I was a good writer, and then political science, government, just because it's good to know that stuff if you're going to get into producing news and just understanding that big part of the news side. So that was my idea coming out of college.
So I don't even think I know this. Why are you working for Key Media? How did that all happen?
It's a pretty funny story, actually. So I got a job straight out of college working for Kellerland, which is a local news station here in Sioux Falls. And I started as a production assistant, eventually worked my way up to producing a online show. It's called First at 4, which they don't even have anymore. It's like a 15, 20-minute show that would tease the evening shows. So the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock news, we would just tease stories so that people could tune in and watch those. So I was producing that. And I got an inside look of a producer's job. And I was like, oh, that sucks.
It's tough.
It's tough because you have to start out working some pretty crappy hours, showing up at 10 o'clock at night, working till 1 in the morning so you could, get the 4 a.m. show ready to be done. And I knew I was going to have to go through that route. And that was just something that I never really wanted to do, And so actually, I had a really bad day on the job. And it was in summer, and so, I wasn't making a lot of money, and so I was working a couple of different jobs, and I was just fed up with it. I was like, I decided I didn't want to be a producer, but that's all I kind of had my mindset on. So I went on the Augustana job website, their career center, and I found this job for a Key Media Solutions digital specialist. And for those of you listening, I'm not a digital specialist. Luke is a digital specialist, and we do not have the same job.
No, not quite.
And I saw the description, and it was like experience in online, and I was like, I produce an online show. I was like, I have experience.
I've been on the internet a few
and
times.
I am pretty good at writing, so I got pretty creative with the resume. And so I submitted my resume for a digital specialist job and got called in for an in-person interview. And I guess to make it short, I wasn't qualified. I was not qualified to be a digital specialist. But for some reason, Karina and Paul at the time decided that what we did need was a content specialist. So they ended up giving me a call back, and I think the call went, so we're not hiring you as a digital specialist. And I remember like, well, that's a bad way. Just say thanks for coming. He said, but we would like you to learn a little bit about this new job. We're thinking about this new position. And so at that point, I was like, well, it sounds right. It makes sense to me. I'll do it. Because I didn't want to do the job that I was in line doing. So I was like, I need to get out of here. So for a while, it was like, well, let's do this, see what this is about, and maybe it'll introduce me enough to an industry where I'll be able to move on from there. And it turns out content specialist is what I like to do, and so I'm here 2.5 years later.
So what exactly do you do?
So I'm a content specialist here at Key Media Solutions, and what I do is I kind of oversee the creation and distribution of content in all different shapes, sizes, however it comes out, whether the content lives on the website for ourselves or clients, whether it's blog posts, social media management, creating videos, infographics, any sort of content, and then distributing it in a way that it gets enough traction and attention as possible. That's the whole goal, and that's what I do here.
I want to ask, how did you get involved with doing the video stuff for Groton High School football?
Mm-hmm.
How did that all happen?
So
first, explain what it is you did, and then.
So what I did this year, I think it'll be easier to explain why I did it, and then explain what I did for it. It was my brother's senior year in high school football, and like I mentioned, there was a brother in between us. And from Matt, the one who is in between us, I never got to see him play football because I was playing college football. So I never got to see him play high school, which kind of sucked, is because, that's where you're a star. In college, it's a little bit harder to stand out. And so for my brother's senior year of football, this youngest one, I decided I'm going to try and make it to every single game. And I wanted to do something fun, and I wanted to do something for him specifically because it was his senior year, and I wanted to make it special for him. And I've been getting into recording videos, and I enjoy it. It's kind of a hobby of mine. So I was like, I should make a senior video for him, kind of a highlight video for him. And then from then, it evolved to, there's only like 7 seniors. I should do, as a senior gift, I should just make a highlight film for one of them. And then it evolved further because when I was in college, we had highlight videos for each week. Every week we had a little like recap video of the previous game to get us hyped up for next week's game, or that game we were playing that day. And I was like, it would be really cool if they did that for a high school team, because I'm sure like bigger schools like Sioux Falls have media departments, like school programs that do something similar. Maybe they don't. If you don't, let me know. I'll charge you for it. But so I thought this might be kind of fun. So that's exactly what I set out to do. So every game, I went with my camera, with our camera, and I just recorded the games. And I made little highlight videos of each week. And I created a Facebook account for it so I could share it to the parents. And what was kind of cool was I made these videos, and since my dad was an assistant coach, I would share the videos with my dad before I posted them online so that the players could see it before anybody else, and that they always did breakfast before games, and so they showed the videos at breakfast, and they loved it, and it was fun, and I did it for them.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't love that?
Exactly, and so I had just as much fun making the videos as it was, sharing it to them, and so that's what I did, and they turned out to be really cool. I think they turned out to be really cool.
Well, yeah, I got to see a few of them. I thought they were really cool too.
They were a lot of fun to do. It was just a hobby of mine, and I got an excuse to stand on the sidelines for the football games. That's pretty much what it was, yeah.
So we're going to get into the last topic because we're getting pretty lengthy here. We're going to talk about the NFL and just kind of today.
Yeah.
NFL. Well, first I want to ask, so you're a Vikings fan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk about how it's been being a Vikings fan the past 20-something years of your life?
20-something years. To say it's been up and down is, I think, an exaggeration because for the most part it's been down. There hasn't been as many ups as there has been downs. Mostly there has been ups, but every up is just met with this drop off, just heartbreaking drop off. Do you remember I don't remember what year it was that we lost to Arizona on like a last second push out.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. The first one, I was too young to remember the field goal.
98.
Yeah, I was too young to really appreciate that. I remember where I was. My parents were actually at that game because they had season tickets.
That's crazy.
So my parents were at that game, and I remember watching it with my grandpa and grandma. Excuse me, just my nana. And I remember we lost, and I was like, oh, dang it.
You didn't think anything that Gary Anderson only missed one field goal the entire year.
Yep. So I remember watching the game. I remember I was at my house. I remember Nana was there, and I think my dad cried on the way home. But the Arizona loss when they got pushed out.
I remember that one.
That was the first one. I was heartbroken, and I remember thinking like, why would they do this to me?
Right.
Why would they do this to me? And then the other memorable one. I don't know why we need to talk about these horrible things happening, but that's what happens, was the Brett Favre thing. Yep. And the funny thing about that is, so my dad, diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, and I remember because he was a high school coach and I was in high school football at the time, and we were doing fall camp. And when it was announced that Brett Favre was signed to the Minnesota Vikings, my dad came out to practice livid, just livid that Vikings administration would think that this, and he's cool, he'll swear to it. He sat us all down. He said, boys, you know what's going to happen? He said, we're going to have a great year. We are going to have a phenomenal year. And just at the last minute, he's going to ruin us. And he said that. He said that the day that the Minnesota Vikings signed Brett Favre. And I remember sitting in the room watching that game against the Saints when the interception happened. And my dad, all he did is he stood up and he quietly said, I told you. I told you. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I wasn't laughing, but I think he just walked away. And so anytime the Vikings would heartbreak us like that, we had a flagpole in our house growing up. We had a Minnesota Vikings flag. So my dad would take down the flag and he would turn it upside down. And he'd put it back
that would be funny if you put it at half mast too, or that, like for a
yes,
tragedy.
and so he walked outside and did that. And so right now, we're riding a good wave, and I'm excited, just like I think a lot of, and we've talked about it a lot, I'm excited, but I'm nervous. Mm-hmm. With success, I just get nervous.
Especially with the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm nervous, and we had a loss. It was a I hate to say it, but it was a decent loss. Mm-hmm. You know,
we played bad.
We had a bad game, which is going to happen. It's a long season. You're going to have a bad game.
But we only lost by 7.
And we only lost by 7. So what I always like to say to football fans is that, you know, the good teams win the ugly ones. And winning the ugly ones shows me that you're a good team. Now, we didn't win that one, but it was an ugly game because both teams made mistakes. It was an ugly game, and they ended up coming up winning with some big plays. So I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with that. We're not in a situation where it's make it or break it. But I'm just as nervous. You know, I'm just as nervous.
Yeah. Well, I always try to think too and tell people we just came out of our toughest 4 games, 3-1.
Yeah.
Beat the Rams, beat the Lions on Thanksgiving, which is big. Yeah. Beat Atlanta, and we lost to Carolina.
Yes. Close.
So then now we have Cincinnati, I think, and then I think it goes Packers and then Bears. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers will be back, but I still think we can win.
I still think we can win, and I heard a good point. I can't remember who said it, but I was watching a story, and they said, I think they were talking about the success of Case Keenum, but what they said made a lot of sense to me. They said the Vikings are a good football team. They said Case Keenum is having success because he's playing for a good football team. Defensively, offensively. Now, the offensive line scares me after last week's game because we had some injuries and we saw what a non-experienced offensive line can do, so that scares me a little bit. But I think a large part of his success is because it's just a good, well-rounded team, from coaching all the way to the people out on the field. So that what I was going to talk about, and you told me to save it, you know, for this, was that I think, you know, because I think as a Minnesota Vikings fan, it's really easy to put us in a situation where we say, you know, we could win any game, we could lose any game. But what I'm starting to lean towards is that I don't think we could lose every game. I think we're as much of a team, whereas we play bad, we're going to beat some badly managed teams. Just because we're managed good and we have enough of a system put together, whereas if our offense plays really bad against a bad opponent, now if you play against a good opponent, they're going to take advantage of a certain situation. But if you're playing against a bad opponent and your offense is playing bad, I think we have a good enough defense in place to make up for that. So I'm excited to see how the rest of the season goes. And it's weird being able to talk about playoffs so early. But, you know, I don't want to talk about it, but it is something that's going to happen. You know, so I'm excited to see how that goes. And at this point, I said this to you early. I said this to you early on. I said the Vikings are going to be good this year because nobody expected them to be good. With all the injuries, nobody was looking at the Minnesota Vikings saying they're a contender this year. They were saying they have a good defense, some of the league's best defense. They were saying that, but I think part of the reason is because we kind of flew under the radar. We had success, and we were able to put together a team that was just solid. So I think that's what we have now.
Yeah, and we lose our starting quarterback and then our stud rookie running back. And I know when that happened, I'm like, uh-oh, what's going to happen now? The next guy stepped up.
And I think that's a testament to the system in place.
Yes.
You know, we have a system that I think it goes to coaching. You know, there's and people, the offensive coordinator's name, I can't think of it. But during the last game, they were saying that he's going to be a huge name for head coaches coming into the offseason, which I wouldn't want to see him go. But you know, but that's just good quality people on offense and on defense. So.
Yeah, and then because then you compare it to the Packers and how they've been struggling hard without Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, he's the best. You can say one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but just you know their struggle.
Yeah, I mean, the right now I don't think the Vikings are built around one player, which there's benefits that, like, look at Carolina. Carolina has an offense that's really built around Cam Newton. They struggled earlier in the season. He's healthy now. And we saw what one big player can do. It's a different game if Cam Newton doesn't break that long run at the very end of the game. Yeah. So I think but he goes down, they're in trouble. So I think the Vikings are in a different situation. It's a different style of team.
Do you have any other favorite teams other than Minnesota? Or is it not to be a favorite team that we root for? Yeah,
I like the Patriots. I have the Patriots have always been number 2 for me for a long time, and it's because I have liked their culture and just I like Belichick just because he's kind of no nonsense. We're here to get stuff done. I like that mentality. Mm-hmm. It's just we're going to be good at what we do. We win, we lose, move on. Mm-hmm. I love that mentality because I think that can be applied in.
I saw a quote from him. Somebody asked him, so you've done so much as a coach. Well, what's next? And he asked him, oh, well, I really hope you have a good practice today. He just didn't even, or he didn't even talk about the fact that he's one of the most winningest coaches ever. But he's I hope we have a good practice today. And I think that means something.
Yeah, and I kind of back in my mind cheer for them, and I know they're not the favorite because they are so good, and I kind of always like to see them. I kind of secretly root for them, but really that's about it. We were both saying how we can't really not cheer for the Eagles. I have no reason to dislike the Eagles. I like that Carson Wentz was the quarterback, just because he was a Midwestern guy. So I like to see them be successful, but not so much anymore just because the Vikings are successful. So,
who's your favorite player on the Minnesota Vikings right now?
CJM.
That was who's your second favorite?
Thielen.
I think he's probably my favorite.
Yeah. Thielen. I like his story. I like how I played against him, and so I like that connection.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Last question. Mm-hmm. Who is going to beat who in the Super Bowl this year?
Okay. I'm scared to. You're going to hear a sound. I'm going to knock on wood here when I say it, but I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to make it, and I'll tell you why. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to make it because they're hosting it. Because that is a crazy situation, and it's never happened before, and I think it would be just the Vikings style to make it to the Super Bowl and make it the first time the host of the Super Bowl is making it to the Super Bowl. And there's conspiracy theories out there that the NFL is rigged, and if it is, make this happen because your marketing, you can market this. You can market this, and the NFL ratings are a little bit down, so market the crap out of this. Yeah. So if it is rigged, if anyone's listening to Sports with Luke or this podcast right here, make it happen because you can market this. So I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to beat. I think the Steelers.
They've been playing real good.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are. I think they're going to make it, and if it's rigged, do a rematch thing too. A rematch of earlier in the year, you could do that as well. Mm-hmm. So I say Minnesota hosts, and obviously I'm going to say Minnesota wins against the Steelers.